We went from giving reps this cigarette lighter where they could burn one or two people to a flamethrower where their entire ICP was decimated. And
Welcome back to the RevGenAI podcast. Today I'm joined by Justin Shriber, the CEO and co-founder of Terret AI and the host of his podcast, Revenue Mavericks. Justin has spent a lot of time in and around senior revenue operations and conversations. He previously led a similar approach at a company called People.ai. And right now, he's spearheading go-to-market at Terret, and I'm really intrigued by how he's generating pipeline with CROs, CEOs, and customers and operators, and really how he sees revenue leadership and operations changing in this age of AI. Today, we're going to really dive into how different roles are changing in this age of AI and how leaders need to adapt, and what part of sales is becoming obsolete and what opportunities are opening up and being reinvented. Justin, it's great to have you. Of
great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
course. So, can you just start us off by giving us a little bit more of a background on Terret AI? Who do you help, and ultimately, what solution or outcome are you delivering?
So we focus on go-to-market organizations, starting with the chief revenue officer and the partner in crime, the RevOps leader. And we really focus, I like to say that our solution is like Cursor for sales, an agentic experience that allows you to quickly generate critical insights into your business, but operationalize those. In terms of the backstory, I really am coming from personal experience. I started off as a management consultant and loved to get into the data and put together the findings. Hated the fact that it seemed like my recommendations were always just thrown up on a shelf and never really applied. Then I became an operator. At one point, I was running a very large sales organization at Oracle. What I discovered is it's not necessarily enough to know what the answer is. You've got to figure out how to actually change the behavior of the folks on the front line. And so those two insights, number one, getting to the insight, but number two, being able to figure out how to operationalize and activate that at the moment that matter, are really the backstory to Terret. And what we do now is we're able to get to the root cause of key trends in your business. But more importantly, once we have insight, we're able to literally change the behavior of folks on the front line, whether they're reps or managers, to the tune of allowing them to close more revenue in less time and ultimately unlock more productivity.
Hmm, I love it. And you highlighted something that's one of the biggest roadblocks to AI adoption is behavior change. I also imagine that for somebody who's trying to access the full go-to-market data of a company, that you need a lot of trust, right? And so I'm really curious, what do you see works best? I know that you focus heavily on on building that trust with CROs and CEOs, but what do you see works best to build trust and get them to open up to the real problems in their pipeline motion, and even being willing to open up their data to you to really be able to get those insights and drive that execution.
Well, that goes back to one of the premises that was embraced by the Challenger methodology some years ago. And the insight was you need to walk in with a provocative point of view that actually teaches an executive something about their business that they didn't know. I remember I was having a conversation with Jeffrey Moore, who also had a similar point of view, obviously famous author of Crossing the Chasm. And I said, Jeff, that's a great idea. But how do you actually, as a salesperson, walk in and teach a CEO something that they don't know about their business? And Jeff got a smile on his face and he said, well, that's where you hire my consulting firm. So that was kind of the flippant answer, but it was true. And the reality is that several years ago, it was virtually impossible to walk in cold and have an insight. What's really exciting today is that with the technology that we make available, we can literally walk in, and our value proposition is in 48 hours, we can plug into two primary data sources, and we can literally come back and tell you something about your business that you had no idea existed, whether it's a reason that you're losing to competitive X, or a series of product enhancements and how much they'd value to the company. When CROs and CXOs see something that is truly meaningful in their business and that you were able to generate that in literally 2 days, they'll start to pay attention.
I like the perspective of a quick win, and really fundamentally breaking it down to what business leaders already understand, which is either you're losing value or there's value to be gained that you're not gaining yet. You use the phrase "death of a sales leader." Can you explain a little bit more? What do you mean by that? What do you feel will change in sales leadership in this age of AI? What parts are dying, and then what parts are opening up and becoming more possible these days?
Yeah, I remember when I started my sales career, Zig Ziglar and those kinds of people were really cutting edge, and we studied what they said and we tried to apply what they were teaching. And the reality is that while there are still true principles there, the market has moved on. And if you're still trying to run a sales organization like you were in the early 2000s, to a large extent, you're becoming obsolete. I like to say, metaphorically, that last decade's organization or CRO was very similar to Lenny Bernstein, the great conductor. He started with a music score, he rehearsed it with his orchestra. Excellence for Lenny Bernstein was being able to deliver a pristine performance according to the musical score that everyone was following. Likewise, historically, CROs were defined by success or failure in terms of the degree to which they could execute against their playbook. The new model is what I like to think of as Miles Davis. He had a band, but there was no score. He had a loose framework for the music that they wanted to create together, but there was an organic nature to that, and he had an ability to move dynamically as the band moved. And today's CRO is constantly capturing new signal from the marketplace, but they also have a mechanism to communicate to their organization how we need to move here, how we need to move there in real time, and literally take thousands of sellers and say it's time to zig or it's time to zag without creating total chaos in the organization. So those sales leaders that move from the Lenny Bernstein to the Miles Davis model are really the ones that are going to stay ahead in terms of their competitive capabilities.
I love that analogy. And being flexible as we're going through change, being able to adapt, I think is one of the most important traits. Being able to adopt to completely new and different market conditions. Let's talk for a second a little bit down the organizational chart. Um, for personal experience, as well as I know that this is the case for a large majority of the population, they're still very apprehensive and worried about AI replacing them and losing their jobs and what will come from that future. And so I imagine that AI adoption is also halted a lot of the times by reps who want to avoid that behavior change and do the same thing that they were doing last year or the year before, and they're worried about replacing themselves and being out of a job. How do you recommend to executives and leaders or reps themselves to change their mindset around that so that they really can start to become even more powerful and able to deliver more revenue than they were ever before?
Well, look, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you what the world's going to look like 5 years from now. I tend to be an optimist, though, and believe that there will always be an opportunity for exceptional and hardworking individuals. But what I can tell you is that today, what is valued is sales reps, managers, executives that are able to create incremental value in their organization. And what I'm seeing is you've got essentially two camps. Camp number one are those that are saying, AI is exciting. I'm going to figure it out myself. I'm going to learn how to apply it to my job, and I'm actually going to become considerably more productive as a result of this exercise that I'm going through. Category number two is saying, I'm worried about losing my job. I'm afraid of the technology. I'm going to maintain an arm's length distance from it. It's not surprising that the first group is the group that is continuing to thrive. And I would argue that moving forward, the group that will be rewarded is the group that continues to create value. There will always be a place for individuals that are adding incremental value into an organization. So the doctrine I like to preach is your responsibility is to figure out where you can add to the system. And today, it is a mandate that you've got AI in order to add that value into the system. Stop worrying about whether or not your job goes away and just continue to focus on how you can add value, whether it's internally or more importantly, to the customers and prospects that you're working with.
I love the frame of everybody can still add value. You just seem to be very hyper focused on that. And I remember your framing that you mentioned to me that AI can be a waste of money and AI can also be a game changer, and both of those can be true for companies. Um, when you operate through the lens of looking at the value of what is being done with AI, where do you see companies wasting the most money most commonly, and where do you see AI actually creating measurable revenue impact?
So, in terms of wasting money, I see that a lot of companies are involved in science projects right now, trying to build these massive AI engines from the ground up. In many cases, they're exploratory ventures without well defined outcomes. And nine times out of 10, that never ends well. The companies that are nailing it have predefined use cases and are open minded in saying, has somebody already solved this use case? And if so, let me just use that technology. Or let me find a technology that solves most of my problems and there's some flexibility there so I can add on to the top of it. And I'll give you out of the gate a couple of areas where companies are solving problems, and these are use cases that are getting immediate value. The first is being able to analyze what your closers are doing and building unique playbooks based on that. AI is an incredible tool that allows you to extract your own specific playbook for your company. The second is generating a forecast. Machines are just really good at anticipating where you're going to land. They can process a lot more signal, and on top of that, they can provide the color commentary that executives need to determine how they're going to drive the organization. And then the third thing is tactical but important, just capturing and auto populating systems. I'm on calls all day, I'm exchanging email, I'm in person. Honestly, salespeople are not good at, in a high fidelity way, taking all of those discussions and putting them into a CRM system. AI has solved that problem. Stop asking the reps to do that and just use AI to auto populate the information that the folks on the front line are capturing.
Hmm. I like the clarity of focus first on the use case. Oftentimes, people are just playing with the technology or trying to, you know, invent a tool instead of focusing on what problem they're using the tool to solve, right? And I think that where you can get lost is because that's not defined, and where you go from there, you just get lost. And I myself have learned that, through lots of unfinished projects. And so even being open to not being the most innovative, like cursor like company that has completely, reinvented the use of the technology over and over to where you're just hyper focused again on how do you deliver value, right? And what's the use case that is breaking to where you need to fill that, and seeing how there's multiple ways to solve that. There's ways that you can ask humans to solve that problem, and you can get AI to solve that problem, or humans and AI to work together. And also just the idea of there's a lot of problems that keep coming up that you just need to change the way you think. For example, what you shared about, how to capture information and make sure that you keep all that information, you don't keep on, losing the source and operating with the wrong data. I am curious to dive a level deeper though into um, how do you see your own go-to-market approach working in in Terret, and specifically why you decided to start Revenue Mavericks, your own podcast, and what you learned from that.
Well, I think that my own personal experience, I was getting interrupted, if you will, all the time. Phone calls coming in unsolicited, email coming in that made it past my spam filters. And it was really becoming an annoyance and a distraction to the job that I did. And the light bulb moment for me was this insight that people don't want to be interrupted, they want to be invited. And that's kind of what we built our entire go to market function around. We moved from cold calls and cold emails to invitations. And the way that we served at those invitations, a couple of different strategies. Number one, on LinkedIn, taking time to, rather than just trying to blast out derivative content based on what we'd seen everybody else. We wanted to have a distinct point of view. And then we wanted to have a series of additional artifacts behind that that kind of built on the idea. And so we would post these insights on LinkedIn. And if people were interested, we'd invite them to comment and participate in a discussion. If they wanted more information, we'd invite them to ask for more information. And at each stage, we were able to deliver them a deeper payload. And we found that people were very interested in certain topics and they would kind of opt in themselves. And once somebody said, "Hey, yeah, could you send me that 2 or 3 times?" You know that you've got an engaged person and it's appropriate to reach out to them. Revenue Mavericks was another great example. I found, and this was actually an idea that I started at People AI. I had a podcast and we would interview chief revenue officers at organizations, often organizations that we were trying to crack ourselves. And from there, we'd build a landing page that was specific. So, for example, Chris Degnan was the chief revenue officer at Snowflake at the time. And I interviewed Chris, and then we built a landing page with some insights that Chris shared. And we sent that landing page to all of the folks at Snowflake and said, had a great conversation with Chris. He talked about where the business is going and what he expects from his people. If you're interested, check it out. Here's a couple of other artifacts that reinforce what Chris said. Well, of course, if I'm working for Chris, I want to know what the boss is talking about. I'm going to go to that landing page and read all of the insights because that's going to help me. And then, oh, that's interesting. Down below, I see a couple of artifacts that might be able to help me put into practice what Chris was talking about on the podcast. So again, there's an invitation to learn more rather than an interruption moment. I think more and more people are going to become intolerant of being interrupted, but they are going to appreciate a very thoughtful invitation that meets the moment and helps them with whatever it is that they're focused on at the time.
Hmm. I love the framing, and exactly that's the reason that we use this as our primary go-to-market approach, and bringing it down to just the crystal clear idea of how annoying it is to be interrupted. Everybody hates that feeling of just like, what's this email even doing in my inbox? Like, can I get rid of it? Versus the feeling of, wow, this person actually researched something relevant and they're offering me value, and that comes off so much uh more trustworthy, which again is why it works. And that's becoming more and more important in this age of you know um everybody posting more and generating more AI slop and being able to send out more and more outbound. It's becoming more and more important to create that feeling of a personalized invitation as opposed to, let me just cram it down your throat and hopefully you'll buy. Um,
And what's interesting is I think that we've moved from annoyance to actually highly dangerous tools that we're putting in the hands, for example, of SDRs. I don't think anyone ever really appreciated being interrupted, but 10 years ago, you just couldn't scale these programs to the extent that you can now. So you might burn, a contact here and there and not be able to talk to them again. But today, in literally an afternoon, because of the scalability of these tools, you can torch your entire ICP by blasting out a series of emails or a series of robo dials. We went from giving reps this cigarette lighter where they could burn 1 or 2 people to a flamethrower where their entire ICP was decimated. And so that's where I think CROs need to wake up and acknowledge the fact that maybe these tools that we're putting in the hands of the SDR aren't such a great idea after all. And another good example of how the CROs are evolving their thinking to meet the market and the mindset where it is today.
I love that. Yeah. I really appreciate the perspective you've brought today, Justin. For anybody who wants to connect with you or even come be a guest on Revenue Mavericks, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, I'm really active on LinkedIn, so DM me, or you can check out our website. We've got a lot of rich content there, and if you're interested in any of that, ping us as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bear.